Today we answer two questions. One, can two guys do what Wizards of the Coast couldn't? And number two, how do you put starships, spaceships, submarines, airships into Dungeons and Dragons? So let's clarify. This is a review video, and I was specifically asked to make this video by Homie and the Dude. Their real names are Brody and Tom. They're a father and son design team, and they have a new Kickstarter called ZEPHYRS, and that's what this video is all about. And in all honesty, I am not getting paid to make this video. However, if you do back their Kickstarter and you follow the link below, then I will receive some compensation for the number of people who back the Kickstarter and follow the affiliate link that they gave me. And the other thing that's super important here, what the heck happened to Spelljammer? This was probably the most anticipated D&D setting. For years, all I've seen online are people talking about what setting do you want Wizards of the Coast to make next? And Barovia was at the top of the list, and Spelljammer was at the top of the list, and Eberron was at the top of the list. Wizards of the Coast did a great job on Curse of Strahd, Ben Richten's Guide, and Eberron Rising from the Last War. All those books were solid. So what happened with Spelljammer? How do you make a spaceship game without rules for spaceship combat? I just don't get it. So here to solve that problem is Homie and the Dude, Tom and Brody. They have the ZEPHYRS Kickstarter, and what we're going to do today is review it and take a look at it now. All right, let's take a ride on a ZEPHYR. Now, this is their sample pages that you can download from their Kickstarter. So now they sent me about twice as many pages as this, but this is a 20-page document that you can download straight from their Kickstarter and get a good sample of what you're going to get when you back this product. And it's just really cool. Just look at the art on the cover. And this art shows you exactly what you're going to get in this game add-on, right? You have these two ships that are locked in combat. This ship is firing fiery bolts at the other ship. Up here on top, you've got, I'm presuming, a player character who's loading some sort of magical ballista that's getting ready to fire on the other ship. The ship is taking damage, and you can see that one of the systems is starting to fail as it's sparking and smoking. And all of that is represented in the rules. The rules actually give you everything you need to make that kind of scene happen. The ships have their own hit points and can take damage. And then there's different systems on your ship, and the individual systems can take damage. And then, of course, those systems can get repaired, and your ship can get repaired. So it becomes very clear that your ship's going to take damage when you get into fights. And you're going to be attached to that ship, and you're not going to want those systems to fail, and you're going to want your ship to perform at an optimum level. So players, I think, are going to get really invested in the ship, especially once they start designing their own, and we'll come back to that too. Now let's scroll down because I want to show you the table of content. Now here we have 12 chapters. So this is a full-size book that you're going to get in a PDF form. I think that's going to be around 250 plus pages. And real quick, let's just breeze through these chapters. So we have air zone rules, which I definitely want to show you those in a minute. Then you have the rules for the ZEPHYRS themselves, the actual rules for your ship. And chapter 3 shows you how to build your own ship. Now, what I'm thinking is you're probably going to want to start your players off with a small to medium-sized ship so they can get used to using the rules in conjunction to the 5th edition rules that they're already used to. And then from there, once they're used to that, you can have them design and build their own ship, or steal a bigger ship, or buy a bigger ship and then upgrade it accordingly. Then we come down to chapter 4 for the air crew rules. And so here you have your actual rules for the crew on your ship. And your crew has morale and a variety of different things your crew can do. Then you have the specific combat rules in chapter 5. Then there's downtime rules in chapter 6, which is, I haven't seen chapter 6, but it says here games. Now I'm wondering, does that mean there's actually games within the game that your crew can play, that your characters can play with their crew, like dice games or card games? That would be cool if they had like some in-game rules. And then there's sea shanties. I'm excited to see how they do that. And then chapter 7 are all the different player features. So how your players can do certain things on the ship and have certain roles as part of the crew themselves. Then chapter 8 is for us DMs to be able to build our crews, our NPC crews, so that we can have our ships fight the player ships. Then in chapter 9, you have spells and magic items. Then we come down to chapter 10, and it didn't hit me until probably the third time I looked at this, that chapter 10 says creatures and mounts. So now I'm thinking you could have flying mounts like a griffin or a dragon. So you have some PCs who are riding flying mounts and the other PCs who are crewing the ship. Some of your players jump on the griffin and fly over to the enemy ship and jump off as a boarding party. Now you have a boarding party on the enemy ship. You have somebody flying around on the griffin, and then you have a couple players who are still on their ship, manning and crewing and firing away. It just seems like super dynamic and exciting combat can be created with these rules. And then in chapter 11, they have all the pre-made Zephyrs. They have Zephyrs of all different sizes. I want to say there were 25 different Zephyrs that you're going to get in the book itself. Again, so you can just pick one to give to your players to start with. And then once they get used to these rules, then they start building and upgrading their own ships. Chapter 12 is also something that's exciting because there's conversion rules for space, naval, and subnautical. So you can take these rules and use them for spaceships or just regular Navy ships on the surface of the water, or submarines going under the water. So maybe you're running the Critical Role's Call to the Nether Deep campaign and you want a set of rules to do some submarine combat. Here you go. Now remember I said we were going to come back to the air zone, so let's do that. So these are the air zones here. You have your Terran zone, which is close to the ground and where it's more dangerous. You're more likely to run into like mountaintops or tall trees or tall buildings. Your Sky Congestion zone, more likely to find other ships or flying creatures in this zone. The Meridian zone is your wide open, easy flying airspace. And then your Trade Wind zone is where you can get a boost to your speed because the velocity of winds up here is much higher. However, if you're not going the same direction as those winds, then the trade winds are working against you. Then up here you have the Wind Shear zone, closer to the upper atmosphere where there's colder winds and giant storms are more likely. And even like the art here shows this giant predatory flying fish. I mean, that's pretty cool. Now I want to jump down to the combat rules, mainly because I just want to show you this other piece of art. Now from an artist's perspective, this art is not super detailed or super realistic as far as like art style realistic. However, it's just so evocative. And I think that's the point, is they're not going for realism here. They're going for the evocative nature of how this art represents the gameplay they've designed. So again, we've got these ships taking damage and throwing off sparks, and people are swinging on ropes, trying to go from one ship to the next. Just super exciting and evocative art. And the rules, again, support this style of play, which I think is great. And while we're talking about the rules, there's one more thing I want to point out that I think is great design work. And as we do, let's take a look at some more cool art from this Kickstarter. The thing that I think is the most elegant part of the Sky Zephyrs design is that your characters give orders to the crew by using their bonus actions. That way, during combat, your characters can still use all their cool player character abilities. They're only spending their bonus action commanding the crew to get the ship to do what they want. I think that's excellent design. And one of the other cool things in the Kickstarter is that a lot of these NPCs, they have STL files. That's a lot of letters. NPC STLs. So if you're into 3D printing and you back the Kickstarter, you'll get the STL files for the NPCs that are in the book. So you can get those printed, or if you print them yourselves, you can have those characters as miniatures for your tabletop game, which I just think is really a neat add-on. In fact, there's actually an STL for one of the airships. So they're at $17,000 as of time of recording. If they hit $20,000, they unlock the stretch goal for the STL of an airship. So you could print a 3D airship to use at your game table, or just decorate your office with, or whatever. How cool is that? I'm sure a lot of the folks who've already backed the Kickstarter have their fingers crossed that it's going to reach that stretch goal. For me personally, in my game group, Sky Zephyrs is going to work really well, because I've got one player who loves science fiction and science fantasy. I've got another player who really wants to play Spelljammer, and I really want to run Radiant Citadel. So this is perfect for us. having sky ships allows me to kind of tie all three of those things together, have one big campaign combining the locations of Radiant Citadel with a Spelljammer adventure. I just think it's perfect for us. Probably need to do a video on this, but if I was thinking about my top 10 5th edition adventures, Curse of Strahd would be probably near the top. But then the other 4, right off the top of my head, that would definitely be in my top 10 would be Radiant Citadel, Eberron, Ravnica, and Ghost of Saltmarsh. Those are some of the best written, best designed 5th edition adventure books, and this Sky Zephyrs supplement would go perfect with all of those. Think about Saltmarsh, for example. You could start off with the basic adventures around the town of Saltmarsh, but then the rest of the Saltmarsh book has a number of underwater locations and adventure ideas for you to be able to expand once you complete the actual Saltmarsh adventures. And that's where you could add one of these submarines from the Sky Zephyr campaign, and you could do a cool underwater submarine 2,000 leagues under the sea kind of adventure. That'd be fantastic. Obviously, sky ships fit perfectly in Eberron. That's a no-brainer. Then you have Ravnica, and I've never run adventures in Ravnica. I just know that I love the design of the book itself. And Wizards of the Coast put out a number of free Unearthed Arcana supplements for other Magic the Gathering settings. So imagine if you had a Sky Zephyr that was able to planeswalk. Then you could have a Magic the Gathering plane hopping adventure with your giant Sky Zephyr. That would be awesome. The more I think about it, I keep coming up with cool ways to use this supplement in all sorts of campaigns. So even if you're not a 5e player, think about how cool airships would fit in the weird science fantasy of Dungeon Crawl Classics. Another setting that this makes me think of, Mystara. If you're an old school AD&D or BECMI player, how cool would it be to add Sky Zephyrs to the Mystara setting? I know Mystara doesn't get a lot of love, and I know it has its flaws, but still, it's one of the classic Dungeons & Dragons settings, and Sky Zephyrs would definitely take Mystara to the next level. Those are all the different ways that I came up with to use Sky Zephyrs in your D&D campaigns. But the most obvious one is you could just use Tom and Brody's own setting and check out their podcast to learn more about it. But overall, what do you think? Did I answer the 2 questions I posed at the beginning of the video? Did Tom and Brody do what Wizards of the Coast couldn't? Is Sky Zephyr the answer for vehicle combat in Dungeons & Dragons? It looks like it. But either way, as always, I appreciate you for watching. Thanks for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.